Well, hello. Happy Wednesday to all of you. This is the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand in the big chair once again. Another cold start to the day, and my goodness, a couple of crashes on the harbor bridges this morning. Backed up traffic. The morning commute was just a peach, I'll say, this morning. Now, I know traffic congestion was a hot topic during the municipal campaign, and it was on the agenda of at least one of the parties running in the provincial election yesterday, but removing all the tolls in the world won't fix the backup caused when two vehicles collide together on the bridges, on one bridge, never mind two. Wow. I'm sure there are still some of you that are in the car on the way to work this morning, and if your bosses are angry, just say, well, this is what happens. I'm going to dispense again with my regular commentary this morning because I have a very special guest in the studio. Now, as part of our coverage of the provincial election campaign, we're working to bring the three main party leaders to you to give you access, so to speak. And today, we're very pleased to have the leader of Nova Scotia's New Democrats in the studio, Claudia Chender. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Great to be here, Dan.
It's nice to finally face them. We've talked many times, and I know you've talked many times with Todd. But now in the studio, this is great. I'm glad you're here. Now, the same rules apply to everyone. Please keep your questions short. Try to avoid those long preambles and try to get to the point as we can get as many callers in as we can during this hour. Claudia, I understand the issues are complex as well in the province, but I would ask you try to keep your responses as short as you can. Obviously, there's some
you
content.
and my whole team would ask that.
Fair enough, right? It's not just me. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Claudia is here for the next hour and is here to answer your questions. So get in there, get your calls in early to avoid disappointment. As usual, I'll kick things off this morning. First off, welcome, and I appreciate you spending some time with us. Now, my first question for you is that both of your opponents, both Liberal leader Zach Churchill and PC leader Tim Houston, have promised tax cuts if they're elected. The Liberals promising a 2% cut, the PC's a 1% cut. What are your thoughts on tax cuts beginning next year?
Well, I think those early promises reflect the challenges that people are facing with affordability right now, and there is no question that those are real. I've been at the doors like everyone else the last few days, and that is what I hear about. Things are expensive. And so, we've also talked about taking the HST off of essentials, taking the HST off of groceries. That's something we have a record of doing. We think that approach makes a bigger difference for the people who need it. So a 1% tax cut, as was promised, and I should say Tim Houston makes a lot of promises, so we'll see. But that promise, right, that's going to benefit most the people who buy the most expensive things. And it's not the people who buy the most expensive things that we're hearing from these days. It's the people who are saying, how do I pay every single bill at the end of the month and my mortgage or my rent? And keep my vehicle going, right? These are the things that people are concerned about. So we think that giving people a break on the essentials, and we're going to talk about that in the coming days, sort of what our platform looks like. All the parties will, is going to make a bigger difference.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. Let's go to the phones and welcome Heather to the show. Heather, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am well. Your question for Claudia Chender, please.
Hi, Claudia. We've met before. It's Heather Spidell with the Nova Scotia Moms for Better Mental Health Care.
Hi, Heather.
Hi. And first of all, I just wanted to thank you and Lisa LaChance and your colleagues for standing with the Nova Scotia Moms on World Suicide Prevention Day. And even before that, you've taken the time to listen. You've, shown tremendous compassion and empathy toward us. At a time where we're reliving the nightmares, and we're just trying to help improve mental health care and access so that other families don't have to suffer the tragedies that we live with every day. So thank you for that. As you know, Tim Houston and Brian Comer promised to meet with us more than a month ago. They did that in the legislature, and we've yet to hear from them. And so you mentioned failed promises. What would you do as a party to both support families and caregivers to help their loved ones and advocate for them when they're suffering from mental illness? And also, what are your thoughts on, I don't want to get political, but I guess this is political. What are your thoughts on a government that would meet face-to-face with women who are moms who are struggling and completely ignore them?
Heather, thanks for calling. And I want to start, and thanks for your kind words, but I do want to start by just acknowledging the incredible bravery of you and the other moms who came to the legislature. So for your listeners, Heather and a number of other moms who had lost children to suicide came to the legislature with the memories and the photographs of the children that they had lost. And as difficult as I know that was, it's so important. And we often talk about how the legislature is the people's house, and it is. And when the people come, we see change. And so, I want to salute you for keeping the memory of your child alive. And I know that behind all of you are many, many other Nova Scotians who are dealing with the tragedy of suicide and mental health. I think that the Premier and the Minister absolutely should meet with you. And I'm very sorry to hear that hasn't happened, because we know that mental health care in this province is insufficient, to put it kindly. Among the many promises, and we can keep this in mind as we go through the campaign, that this Premier made in the run-up to the last election was universal mental health care, was true access to mental health when and where people need it. And that is nowhere to be seen at the moment. So to your question, that is, as I think you noted, a priority for our party. And our critic, Lisa Lachance, is dedicated and focused on that, and happens to be an expert in the field, particularly around youth mental health. And this is something we would absolutely prioritize, because we talk a lot about the fact that we have a healthcare crisis. We also have a mental health care crisis. It also costs lives. And so we acknowledge the importance of that. And I want to thank you so much for calling in today and reminding the listeners out there of that.
Thanks for the call, Heather. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 is the number. Let's go back to the phones. We welcome Gloria to the program. Gloria, how are you?
Good morning. I'm well. How are you?
I am well.
I have a question for Claudia.
Sure.
You and Susan LeBlanc have been representing North and South Dartmouth for several years now. I look around. What have you accomplished, and why should people vote for you again?
Hi, Gloria. Thanks for calling. It's always nice to see Gloria in Dartmouth and hear her on the radio. Well, Gloria, it's a great question. I mean, I have to say you've been in Dartmouth a lot longer than I have, and have been representing people, certainly, I think, since maybe before I was born. But I will say that in the last almost 8 years, we've seen incredible changes in Dartmouth. So in Dartmouth South, we have an enormous hospital renovation that has taken place. We've seen the Center for Ocean Ventures and Entrepreneurship. Dartmouth North is about to get a collaborative healthcare center, a health home, which Susan LeBlanc has been pushing for publicly and also behind the scenes for years. That is going to be an enormous win for that community. And, for all Nova Scotians, I think what we're seeing is growth in our province. We're seeing the challenges that come with that. We're going to hear about that. But, downtown Dartmouth has never been more vibrant. When I first moved to Dartmouth and owned the old Fisher Stationery building briefly, it was quiet on Portland Street. And now it is booming. And the cruise ships come and the people go on the ferry and they walk through Dartmouth. And all I hear is what an amazing community is and how much growth we've seen. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about that, Gloria. And I really appreciate the call.
Thanks for the call, Gloria. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Some lines available for you if you want to jump onto the show and ask Claudia Chender, the leader of the province's NDP, a question. Speaking of Dartmouth, Claudia, yesterday you were over at Ocean View, which was a hot topic during the municipal campaign, and is highlighting, I think, the issue of affordability, housing affordability in HRM and maybe right across the province of Nova Scotia. What were your thoughts when you took that tour of those apartments and talked to the people there who are going to lose their homes to a high rise?
Well, I think the reason we went to Ocean Breeze, partly Susan LeBlanc, who's the MLA for Dartmouth North, has been very involved. But we know that across this province, what we need are affordable homes, and not just affordable homes, but affordable communities. And Ocean Breeze is an amazing example of that. There are 1,000 people living there, and they're seniors, and they're young folks, and they're young couples starting out, and there's families, tons of families, and they're all living in units that are actually affordable. So they're about half of market rate. And if you ask me, what do we need? This is what we need. And yet, despite pleas from us, from residents, despite New Democrats pushing for this, this premier has just created an environment where these homes are going to disappear. Yes, they're building new homes, but the residents there aren't going to be able to afford them, nor are they going to be able to afford pretty much any of the new construction that we see going on in HRM. This is part of the issue that we're trying to highlight, is that, yes, we need to build more housing. It has to be housing that people can afford. And what we heard from the residents yesterday, and have been hearing from them really for years now, is that there's nowhere for them to go. And so the fact that we're letting these 1,000 people scatter to the wind, these families, these seniors on fixed incomes, is really a travesty, and we felt it was really important to highlight that.
We hear affordable housing a lot, and we hear it. I've been hearing it for years and years now, obviously exacerbated with the homelessness issue that we're facing here, the encampments, the pallet shelters, the mini homes. I hear the word affordable a lot. But when I ask people what affordable is, everybody gives me a different answer. What is your definition of what affordable housing is, and should we put that into a piece of legislation so that it's the same playing field for everybody?
Well, we've actually tried to do that, Dan. Affordable, CMHC has a definition of affordable. You know, when you're getting a house and you're seeing if you can afford a mortgage, it's whether you're spending more than 30% of your pay on rent. And, you know, it's not a perfect formula, but it is relative, right? What's affordable for me might not be affordable for someone at Ocean Breeze, might not be affordable for an executive who works in one of the towers that we're looking at. And so we think that that kind of formula reflects that. And it particularly is important to look at it that way because often affordability metrics are tied to the market, and the market is nuts in Nova Scotia, right?
To say the least.
Yeah, like the rents that people are paying, our rents went up 18% last year in Nova Scotia. Our income certainly didn't, right? So we think that tying that affordability metric to the market doesn't make sense. It's what people can afford. And this is why, you know, people often will say, oh, you're talking about affordable housing. That's for people who are low income. And we'll say, well, no, it's for families. It's for seniors. It's for everyone. And that means something different to everyone, but everyone needs to be able to afford their housing. And there are lots of families across this province who are employed, who have kids, maybe who even own a home, but they don't feel like they can afford it, right? And so I think that's the conversation we need to be having. We need people to be able to have lives they can afford.
We're going to stop and take our first break. Claudia's here for the next 45 minutes. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. In the studio, the leader of Nova Scotia's New Democrats, Claudia Chender. She's here to answer your questions. The number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. This is your opportunity. This doesn't happen often that you get an opportunity to sit down for an hour with a provincial party leader and to have your questions asked. So again, I will ask you to keep your questions short. Try to keep them to one, and we'll try to get to as many people as we can because the lines are starting to fill up. Let's begin this segment with Glenn. Glenn, how are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you guys doing?
We're well. Your question for Claudia, please.
My question is, what is the NDP's plan for the Sydney subdivision of the CBNS Railway? It's currently not being used for the past 15 years and creates a lot of problems for development.
Thanks, Glenn. The railway that runs up from Truro towards Sydney has been abandoned for the last 15 years. And Glenn's question is, do you have any plans for that? Is that something you're going to look at as if you form government?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for the question. And I know rail holds a special place in the heart of Cape Bretoners. It's certainly something I hear about all the time when I'm on the island. And we also know that transportation is an issue. So if I remember correctly, the provincial government has sort of stopped the maintenance of those tracks. And I know that did attract a lot of concern from folks. And so I think that we do have to look at that. It's something that my team has been taking a look at. How do we get people around? There's been lots of focus and talk about HRM and moving people about HRM. You were talking about the traffic this morning, but we know that it's not an HRM problem. It's a provincial issue. How do people travel? And again, Cape Bretoners at one time couldn't just take the train around the island. They could take the train to the mainland and stop in Truro and come right down to HRM. So it's something we're looking at, and we know that we need to have job opportunities that come with that, and we know that we need to have good transportation alternatives for people right across this province, and we know that rail line needs to get dealt with. So it's certainly something we're looking at, and we'll keep talking about it.
When Tim Houston was sitting where you are on Friday and told me that there wasn't going to be an election, well, at least he was not looking. He was looking at it.
He wasn't thinking about it.
He was. His words were, and I don't want to misquote him. He said, we're watching things, and I have to go up to Pictou to rake my leaves, and he did.
I saw the picture.
I saw the picture too, and then he didn't say that he was going to take a return trip on Sunday and go visit the Lieutenant Governor. That aside, one of the things that we talked about when Tim was here was his plans for Highway 102 and to start to explore light rail as an option. What are your thoughts on getting people onto the peninsula and trying to mitigate some of this bonkers traffic that we saw this morning?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in that traffic all the time. I have been really engaged in conversations with residents and chambers of commerce all up through that corridor of the 102 and through HRM, and those challenges are real. And actually, we have this task force, the Joint Regional Transportation Agency. They're looking at that. I think some of what the Premier has been talking about is a preview of that plan. That all makes sense. I think we need to look at it. I think we need to talk about it. I think we need work on infrastructure that has been neglected for a long time. I think we also need to talk about transit. So light rail might be a part of that. I think we need to look at the numbers on that in terms of whether we have the density and whether we have the money.
Anywhere from $10 to $35 billion.
That's right. So I think that, but I mean, it's absolutely worth investigating.
Right.
But I think there's lower hanging fruit. And so the reality is we don't have the kind of transit system that we need for a city our size. But we do have plans for what that could look like in terms of the bus and rapid transit plans that have been ongoing at the municipality for a long, long time. And so I think if we, not everybody wants to take transit, but I think if we had an excellent state-of-the-art transit system where you could actually pay with your phone, where you could actually get from point A to point B in the time that you have allotted to do that, I think we'd get a lot more people using transit. And I think that we would ease a lot of the congestion. And so we're going to be talking about that in the days to come.
And meeting with because obviously Halifax Transit is a municipal responsibility, but would any kind of major infrastructure upgrade would require provincial support, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's even contemplated in looking at that kind of bus rapid transit transformation that, in fact, it would be 3 levels of government that would need to come together to fund that. We think that's an excellent use of provincial funding for all of the reasons that all of your listeners can appreciate just by getting in their car this morning. That's right.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We welcome James to the program. James, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
Your question, please.
Yes, 2 specific issues related to the lack of affordable housing are renovictions, so-called renovictions, and fixed-term leases. And I'm wondering what Ms. Chinder would have to say that the NDP will do if they get an opportunity to do something.
Claudia?
Well, thanks so much for the question. this is something that I hear about all the time. And it's really, really, really important because if you don't know that you can stay in the home that you're living in, everything else becomes so incredibly stressful, right? It's our number one thing, our home. And so I think it's an enormous issue, and I'm really glad that the caller raised it. This is an issue that we have also been talking about for a long time. So my caucus colleagues and I have been raising the alarm about these issues, and New Democrats have been fighting for protection for renters. So in terms of rent evictions, which, by the way, are almost always illegal right now, so I would encourage your listeners who are facing that kind of thing to reach out to Dial Legal Aid, go to the tenancy board, understand what your rights are. That's really important. I think that's a huge issue. Landlords are getting away with a lot in some cases. We're seeing stories about that this morning in terms of illegal deposits. Fixed-term leases, these are a creature of the Houston government's refusal to deal with the rental situation. We talked about how rents are going up 18% this year over last year. We have a 5% rent cap. How could rents go up 18%? They can go up because we have a fixed-term lease loophole. And so anyone who doesn't want to be caught by that rent cap, to have their profit capped, as it were, can sign a fixed-term lease. And so once that lease ends, that tenancy is done, and the next tenant can pay $100, $200, $300, $400 more a month, and it's happening every day. So our policy would ban the fixed-term lease loophole. And what we're calling for is a more comprehensive system of protection for renters, of rent control. We have a cap. The cap doesn't work. And we have a 5% rent cap and 1.6%, 1.4% inflation. So they don't even match. In our plan, rental increases would be tied to the CPI. So that covers costs. That's something that should, by definition, be affordable for the renter and also affordable for the rental provider. And we would have a much more comprehensive way of regulating that, and we wouldn't have this loophole.
So the rent cap doesn't work. Obviously, it doesn't work. Would it be a better plan, or is it something you would consider to cap the increase on the unit rather than on the rent?
Absolutely.
I've seen in places like Toronto where there's if a unit is over a certain age, it's capped at a different rate than the newer ones are.
Absolutely, that would be the case, and I think that actually would be the single simplest change that would make the biggest difference for Nova Scotians right now who are worried about where they're going to go after their fixed term lease. If we could tie that cap to the unit, then people who are in the unit would be able to have security to know that they can stay in their home.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000. We need to stop and take a break for the news. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the world. And when we come back, Claudia's here for another 30 minutes. So get in line. There's a few lines that are open. 902-405-6000. The leader of Nova Scotia's NDP, your guest, after the break. Welcome back. A special edition of the Todd Veinotte Show today. A coffee and conversation, except she's drinking water. I don't know if I'm talking out of class, but she's drinking water, not coffee. And that is Claudia Chender, the leader of the NDP. She's here for the next 30 minutes to answer your questions. The lines are full, so keep trying, and we'll try to get through as many as we can here before the news at the top of the hour. Let's go right to the phone lines, and we will welcome Sid to the program. Sid, how are you?
Hi, good, thanks.
Your question, please.
So we've heard a lot about how the solution to the housing crisis is to build more housing. But frankly, I make a good wage, and even I can't afford a lot of the units that are coming up right now, much less the 7,000 people on the wait list for public housing. I'm wondering what the NDP's plan is to build real, deeply affordable housing for people and bring down the numbers on the public housing wait list.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks, Sid. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this all morning, and in lots of ways, we've been talking about this for the past few years. Housing is increasingly just unaffordable, and we do need housing supply. So we have a Turner Drake study from a few years ago that says that we need tens of thousands of units of supply. I think what we need to do is prioritize affordable housing, and that is something this government is just not doing. And so we've released a lot of our housing plan over the last year, homes within reach. And so absolutely, we would talk about building homes that people can actually afford. And I'll tell you, when I'm talking to folks, like we were in Cole Harbour the other night, and one door was a woman who said, I can barely afford my property taxes. Big house, nice house. She said, it's fallen down around me, but I don't have anywhere to go, right? And she knows that all these places they're building aren't going to be able to be a place that's affordable for her on a fixed income. Similarly, the next door, adult child living at home. And that's real throughout this whole province, right? People can't find a place to move out. So we need to build homes that people can actually afford. And there's a few ways to do that. I think one of them is that we can partner with non-market housing providers, co-ops, public housing you mentioned. There are 7,000 people on the wait list for public housing. But, it doesn't have to just be government. Government said there's going to build a few units. We think they need to build a lot more. But we also think that there are lots of non-market providers in this province who are ready to do that and to manage that housing not for profit, but to make sure that people can live there. We have a long history of housing co-ops in this province and in this city that can do that too. But we can also build housing that's more affordable. And we have examples of that. So there's lots of different kinds of construction techniques that are actually much more affordable. So like True North Crescent in Dartmouth, that's an Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia project. That's a flat panelized construction that happens in a warehouse. And then
it's like IKEA on steroids.
It is. And not only does it mean you can build all year round, you don't have delays, it's also much more ecological. So they can make those homes tight and your bills are lower and cheaper to operate. So we think there's lots of innovation. There's lots of possibility in bringing down those costs. We need to make sure those costs get passed along to the owners, to the tenants. And we believe that that's absolutely possible. And it's something that we're definitely going to be talking about in the weeks to come.
Is that the solution to incentivize developers to build the houses? Or should we take it a step further and get the provincial government into the housing business?
There's lots of different ways that the provincial government can be in the housing business. So we talk about public housing. That's absolutely one. But there's lots of examples of other jurisdictions, and BC is one of them, where the provincial government might buy up a bunch of land around, for instance, a future transit hub that they know will be valuable, and then they can control where that land goes. So maybe it goes to nonprofit housing providers. Maybe it is sold with some affordability covenants. So you make sure that the developers are going to build some percentage of affordable housing. I think there's lots of opportunities, but absolutely, I think that what we've seen for the last 3.5 years is we just need to get more supply built. The private sector is going to solve all our problems. And 3.5 years in, and housing is as unaffordable as ever for so many people across this province, and it's just not cutting it. So absolutely, the province needs to get in the game in a different way.
And one more question before we go back to the phones. The provincial government passed legislation giving their caucus or their cabinet sweeping powers to supersede a council decision. Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's the smart thing to do, to have the minister be responsible to say no, that development can go ahead and take the city out of the equation?
Mm-hmm. I think that that's one of a lot of legislative changes we saw that have really, really frustrated municipalities across this province. Absolutely. As I said, I think the province has a really strong role to play. I think they need to play that role in partnership, in collaboration with all those municipalities who, number one, many of the larger ones have more planning expertise, HRM in particular, than the province might have, and who know what's going on the ground. We've seen some what I might call bully tactics from this government in terms of getting its agenda through. And I think, sometimes we pay the price of that. So we have big questions around infrastructure, around schools, around traffic. The building needs to happen. It needs to happen in a way where we can have complete communities, where we can make sure that people are going to be able to afford them, and where we know that people are going to be able to stay. I think all those things are possible, but they're done much better in collaboration.
902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Jolena to the show. Jolena, your question for Claudia, please.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity, Claudia. We here in Lower Sackville, and based on open hour calls, many parts of Nova Scotia continue to feel unheard on many issues. Community engagement seems to have been removed from decision-making with this current government. Right now, at the forefront is safety of all individuals. Daytime security has been removed from the Beacon House shelter in Lower Sackville, and they say that DCF-provided funds do not cover daytime security. We have increased drug paraphernalia in our community and have had one child poked by a needle while she was playing. What is your plan to change the communication with communities who are currently housing or are potential areas to house shelters, pallet homes, etc.? And what are your thoughts on the importance of all-encompassing community safety, specifically in these areas where harm reduction shelters are being housed?
Thanks, Jelena.
Thanks so much for your call, Jelena. And I can hear from you that this is a scary thing, and I know that there are many folks across HRM and around the province who are coming face to face with some challenging stuff based on where we are in the housing market, as we've been talking to with our social safety net, with our mental health supports, and so all of that is real. I think that, as you point out, we've lost a lot of community engagement. So in the last conversation, we were just talking about some bully tactics, some superseding of a municipal authority. And one of the things that's been taken away is that community engagement piece. Most of my colleagues have these pallet shelters in our districts. None of us were invited into an engagement in any meaningful way. And we know that there are so many communities that also want to be a part of that conversation. We also know that we need housing. We need housing that makes sense and that's safe and dignified for everyone, for the people being housed and for the communities where that housing exists. And so, that's something that the NDP has always been committed to and that we remain committed to. If we prioritize affordable housing in all the ways that we're talking about, we're not going to see people literally being pushed onto the streets in the way that they are now. So, I think it's really important, as you say, we need to make sure communities are safe. We need to make sure communities are engaged. And we also need to make sure that as soon as possible, we don't have a need for these shelters. We don't have a need for pallets because people will be safely and appropriately housed. But in the meantime, the Department of Community Services and the province of Nova Scotia absolutely need to step up and make sure that these spaces have the supports that they need, both for the residents and for the community. The
pallet shelters obviously is a contentious subject, and you said it's a stopgap, it's a Band-Aid solution. Mm-hmm. How long do you foresee that we'll continue to need these things? Because you can't build houses overnight, at least not many.
I think that depends on the government we have. I mean, if you listen to Tim Houston, he'll tell you that the answer to the housing crisis is supply. And if you look around at the supply being built in Lower Sackville and Cole Harbour, in HRM, across the province, really, it's not going to meet the need of the people who are facing deep housing insecurity and who often end up on the street. So it's a question of priorities. I really think that we could address this quite quickly. Housing doesn't go up overnight, but it can go up quickly. We saw the government purchase a hotel. We have seen some quick moves that can really help to alleviate issues for people. We were talking about Ocean Breeze earlier. Ocean Breeze, there's 1,000 people who are going to be really struggling to find a place to live. I mean, hopefully none of those folks end up on the street, but this is happening all across our province every day. We could actually be stopping that from happening. We could be saving these existing communities. In that example, we could buy one of the lots that's for sale from the developer, and we could build some of this flat panelized construction housing. The province could build it. A nonprofit could operate it. That's housing. That's housing where people can actually live. So this isn't a problem that doesn't have a solution. The solution isn't easy, but it's a matter of priorities, and we absolutely believe that there's a path.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000. We're going to take our last break before the top of the hour and come back with NDP leader Claudia Chender. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. Back in minutes.
Thanks.
All right, a few minutes left with NDP leader Claudia Chender. A few lines are open, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We'll head to the phones. We'll welcome Larry to the program. Larry, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you very much. Thank you for taking my call.
My question is with regard to the Nova Scotia film industry. It was desecrated by the former Liberal government, and the Houston government has done a good job in restoring it to its current level. So what is the NDP party's position on supporting this vital industry?
Thanks, Larry.
I really appreciate the question. And fun fact, one of the ways I got involved in politics and started to think about putting my name forward for municipal office was because of the Liberal cuts to the film industry. I have lots of family and friends who are engaged in the creative sector, and I could not believe the short-sightedness of that decision by the McNeil government. So I think we probably agree on that, Larry. And we would absolutely continue to fund that vital industry. Credit where credit is due. I think that the Premier saw something that really touched a nerve, an opportunity for an industry of the future. And he made that part of his campaign, and it was one of the promises he actually kept. And so, I think it's really important, and it's been amazing to see that industry come back. We're excited to see a soundstage. I think that's something that people in that sector have wanted for a really long time. My colleague Susan LeBlanc is an actor when she's not a legislator and a mom. And so she has really been at the forefront of our push for stable funding for that industry and to make sure that it can continue to grow. So I really appreciate the question.
And I again, credit where credit is due. I like the way that the Houston government tied it to the amount of money that is being spent in the province with regards to the film productions, and then because it doesn't look like we're just handing money away. People can see where the money's going. But that being said, how cool is it when you go onto Prime or you go onto Netflix and that's Beaverbank. Like I've been there, or that's downtown Dartmouth,
Totally.
And not only does it generate revenue for the province. I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but people, when they watch these shows, want to come here and see that, right?
Absolutely. And, I think it also, Nova Scotians have such a pride of place. And so I think it is, not only does it have a lot of economic impact, which for whatever reason, the spreadsheets that Stephen McNeil was looking at didn't properly reflect, but it has huge spin-off impacts, of course, right? Especially in our rural communities. So catering and accommodations and all of those things that are somewhat intangible, but make an enormous economic impact. But as you say, when we see ourselves reflected on a big screen, we're reminded of how lucky we are to live here and what a beautiful place.
Can't tell you how many times somebody asks me if I see Tom Selleck or Jesse Stone running around. Happens all the time. And that was years ago.
Yeah.
So it really does work. Or if you've been to Oak Island, yeah, more than once. Let's get Chris on the air here. Chris, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm well. Your question for Claudia, please.
Yes, Claudia, I'd like to know, I know where the other two parties stand on this. It's not a priority to them, but I'd like to know where you stand on environmental issues, in specific, the Coastal Protection Act that Tim and his gang struck down, and the clear-cutting and spraying of glyphosate over our forests.
Thanks, Chris.
I really appreciate the question, and I know that, despite, as you say, the inaction of the other two parties, this is a huge issue for people right across this province. And almost every community that I visit, this is one of the first things that comes up is how are we taking care of our province? We were just talking about the pride that Nova Scotians have in living here, and that is totally intertwined with our natural environment, with our forests, with our coastlines. And so, I think that one of the worst things, actually, that Tim Houston has done is to abandon the Coastal Protection Act. And so for folks who may not know, the Coastal Protection Act was passed by all members of the legislature under the Liberal government. And is essentially a law that would allow bylaws to be made in each region around how we build along our coast. And I think at the heart of that bill is the idea that this is all, our province belongs to all of us. Our coastlines belong to all of us. Now, that may not be true. And increasingly, with the property values going up, like we've talked about, that coastline is getting snapped up by some wealthy folks. But but we believe that it belongs to all of us, and this bill reflects that, and the Houston government decided not to go ahead. And we feel pretty strongly that that's because they've got some wealthy friends who don't want to be told what to do. And they've said property owners should be able to decide what to do with their property. We don't think it's up to a handful of wealthy property owners to decide what happens to our coasts and our province, particularly in a time of climate change, when climate resilience is so important and it impacts all of us. The same thing for spraying and clear cutting. Forestry is a really important industry, and it's an industry with a lot of longevity in our province, and we absolutely acknowledge that. But there's a lot of ecological forestry happening. There's a lot of ways that we can do forestry that is sensitive to our natural environment. And there's lots and lots of evidence around glyphosate and that it's a carcinogen and it's bad. So we take it very seriously. We've been talking about it for a long time. A little search will show you all of the ways in which we've been advocating for that. And we would absolutely pass the Coastal Protection Act when we were elected.
That was my next question.
Yep.
If you form the government, will you do day one?
Day one.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Before we go to the phone lines, it's a major issue, and I don't think we've touched on it at all, and that's healthcare. The premier ran his last campaign on fixing healthcare, and many will say that we haven't seen a whole lot done. We've seen the doctor list grow by 70,000 or so. We saw a little bit of a reduction, but that felt like a rounding error. Your thoughts on if you form government, what's I know this is probably an hour-long discussion, but the top 5 things on your list to fix healthcare.
Well, I can point to 2, and you and I were talking off air, Dan, about some stories that are in the news of a woman who's going through cancer who said her biggest concern is not the care for her cancer, but the fact that she doesn't have a family doctor. And we hear this all the time. So we have a situation where we have at least 145,000 Nova Scotians without attachment to primary care, without access to a doctor in an ongoing way. That's more than double what it was when Tim Houston was elected to fix healthcare. That's a terrible record. And I think that is 100% the focus of how to actually address this healthcare issue. Prioritize primary care. Make sure that people have a doctor clinic they can go to. We're in the north end of Halifax today. Not far from here is the North End Community Health Clinic. This is a model across the country for how to have healthcare clinics that are accessible and appropriate for communities. We should have one of these in every community. There's only 1 million of us. Sometimes that seems big, but in a national context, in a global context, that's small. We have the capacity to do this if that's where the focus of our healthcare energy and dollars go. This government has made 1 million announcements. They've spent billions of dollars. We haven't made a dent in that list. That has to be the priority. And I think the close second, particularly for people outside of HRM, is emergency care. We need to know that people can find an open emergency room and they can get the care they need when they're in a crisis.
How do we get more doctors? I mean, the world is clamoring for doctors. How do we get more to come to Nova Scotia?
So I think that, one piece about, for instance, a North End Community Health Clinic is you have a doctor there, but you also have nurses, you also have nurse practitioners and physician assistants. So we're talking about health teams. That a little bit reduces the stress on a single doctor to serve so many people. But, Dr. Jane Philpott, who's the national expert on this, she says the conditions of care are the conditions of work. And what she says as the dean of a medical school is these are the spaces where doctors want to work. So actually, if you set up clinics like this, if you set up a system like this that is not overburdened, that is sensitive to patient care, it's a recruiting tool. This is where new doctors want to set up their practice, and Nova Scotia is a place where they want to live.
Claudia, we're out of time. I know. It was fun. We should do it again.
Yes, love to.
Where are you campaigning today?
Well, today we are going to be in Dartmouth this afternoon.
My home turf. By to see you.
And you never know. And then tonight I think we'll be in Fairview Clayton Park. But I get told where to go.
Hey, there you go.
I get to as many parts of the province as I can, and by the time the week is through, I'm sure we will have been in dozens of ridings.
Well, I appreciate you spending an hour with us, and we look forward to our next conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much.
That is Claudia Chender, the leader of the province's NDP. When we come back, it's time for House Calls. Dr. John Gillis will be your guest. The line is open. If you have a medical-related question, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We're back after the news.
Dr.
John, you're my medicine man. Dr. John, you're my medicine man.
I don't use no potion, I don't use no pill. Just give me a little loving care, I can cure your ills.
Well, welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Again, our thanks to Claudia Chender, who spent the NDP leader, who spent the last hour in here. There was some that were left on the lines, and I apologize for that. I'm interested in your thoughts of what you heard from Claudia Chender here when we open up the phone lines at noon. The telephone number will open up at 12, and we will take your calls on that and just about anything else. It's the Midweek Meltdown. That coming up at noon today. For the next hour, it's House Calls. Time for Dr. John Gillis to join us and answer your medical-related questions. Should you have a question to ask the doctor, here is an opportunity. We talked with Claudia Chender earlier about a lack of physicians. Here's some access on the radio to a doctor. If you have a question, here's a good chance to ask it. 902-405-6000. We welcome Dr. John to the program. Dr. John, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. Doing well.
Maple Leafs beat Winnipeg on Monday.
Yeah, handily. They actually, I haven't watched a game in its entirety this year, but I watched almost all of that one, and they actually looked pretty good. They were somewhat consistent and got some decent goaltending.
Yeah, it's been a surprise. Stoltz has been Stolarz rather has been a bit of a surprise this year as he came in from Florida. Got some Stanley Cup chops there, so maybe are we planning a route yet?
Yeah, I booked the flatbed, but I haven't applied for the route permit yet.
Fair enough. Again, the number is 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, before we get to the calls and to the questions, I read a story yesterday about the Canadian Medical Association is calling for an end to doctors' sick notes. And I know where you work, Dr. John, I would suppose you see a lot of people that are looking for that note to satisfy either their insurance company or their employer. Your thoughts on this, and do you think that it's going to ease some of the pressure on the ER?
No, I don't think it'll do much with the ER. I mean, we do get people who've been to the ER looking for a note to be off work because they're sick or there's something wrong with them, but they're not typically in the ER to get a sick note.
Okay.
We don't see that very often. I think that falls a lot to family doctors and walk-in clinics and these sorts of folks who are, can be quite inundated with it. It's not a good use of time or resources. I mean, there are people who will game the system, but the impact on the system of, forcing people to, make an appointment, take up a slot and, to be out in public if in fact they are sick, that's the piece that also often gets missed is, if I've got the flu and I'm sick, I shouldn't be, tromping about town and going into a doctor's office where, there may be other sick people, but there may be people there with, an ankle injury or someone there to get their baby checked or, a well female visit, that sort of thing. And you're tromping in with the flu. It just doesn't make any sense.
And I would imagine would tie up appointment times for doctors, and then people are, forced to the ER, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It has a cascade effect, and it serves very little useful purpose. I mean, people that are going to game the system, will game the system. They will take the time to go get their note, but most people don't. Most people, want to be at work. Most people go to work, and in fact, sometimes too much the other way. When they are sick, they should, as our former premier said, stay the blazes home when you're sick. But people don't, and sometimes they should.
Dr. John, before we get to those phone calls, we had a conversation earlier. Steve Murphy had a conversation earlier this week with Dr. Lisa Barrett talking about COVID. What are you seeing with COVID and RSV? Is it starting to lag? Is it getting worse? What's the prognosis on that?
It's hard to even know what it is anymore. There's a lot of viral illness out there. I mean, we used to triage patients as, COVID green, meaning almost certainly not, COVID yellow possible, COVID blue, they got COVID. But now it's VRI, viral respiratory infection, just because there's so much of all the soup out there, RSV, adenovirus, influenza. And again, comes back to, get yourself immunized against whatever you can protect yourself against for yourself, for your loved ones, for your workplace, all that stuff. Get her done if you can.
902-405-6000 is the telephone number. If you have a question for Dr. John Gillis, the lines are open, and this is your opportunity to get on quickly. I got an email question that came in last week, Dr. John, and I'd like to ask it now. This person writes, Mike is his name, I have psoriasis. I've been prescribed the blocker Humira. I'm not sure if it's working. Are there any other options available to me?
Yeah, there's all kinds of options for psoriasis. Psoriasis is basically when, the body kind of attacks itself and causes skin problems. Humira is an immune-modifying drug which tries to tell the body, stop doing what you're doing. You don't need to be doing it. Humira takes time. It doesn't work for everybody. There are similar drugs in that class, and there are other types of treatments. So the short answer is yes, there are a lot of treatments available. It's just a matter of finding the one that's right for you and making sure you give something like Humira enough time.
Is psoriasis a common ailment?
What's common?
Right, fair.
Fairly so. Probably see it a couple times a month in various things that we do. It doesn't tend to be an emergency thing, so I wouldn't just necessarily see it there. Be more a primary care thing, and there's a lot of good treatments out there for it.
Is it weather dependent? Does the cold weather make it worse?
Some people, their skin responds poorly to changes in weather and other factors, not specifically with psoriasis because it's an immune response.
902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. If you have a medical question for Dr. Gillis, here's your opportunity. Another email question, Dr. John. Speaking of the cold weather, this person asks, have you heard of what's called cold weather asthma? When the cold air hits outside, I notice that it becomes harder for me to breathe. Is this a symptom?
It's a common trigger for people. Asthma is spasm of the small parts of your airways, and people are triggered by lots of different things. For some people, it's humidity. For some people, it's dust. For some people, it's any number of things in the environment. I used to have that problem when I was a teenager. Playing sports, I'd get triggered in the rink or on the soccer field when it was cold. I'd take my puffer and I'd be all right. So yeah, that's a common trigger.
And is there do you put a scarf? Does that help, or do you need to have the puffer to help alleviate that?
No, the scarf's not going to do anything other than make you look funny on a soccer or rugby field and get you mocked by your peers.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000. We're going to take our first break. House Calls is on the other side. Dr. John Gillis is here for the next hour to answer your questions. We're back in minutes. Here on that was weird. The lights were on and I was not making any noise. Vanessa, are you messing with me? No, she's shaking her head. I think she is. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000 is the number. Hope you're having a fantastic day. A couple of lines available if you want to get in. If you have a medical-related question, Dr. John Gillis is here and is here to answer them. Dr. John, I've read a lack of vitamin D can lead to some autoimmune disease. Is it possible, or am I just reading something wrong, or how much vitamin D should I be getting daily now that we're losing daylight hours? Hello, Dr. John. Are you muted?
Sorry, did you say D as in dog or B?
D as in dog. Vitamin D.
Yeah, no, vitamin D is needed for a lot of things, bone metabolism, a healthy immune system. So, 1,000 international units a day is probably sufficient for most people. But, it is something that we test. I think it's a reasonable thing to test periodically and to make sure people have good levels. And, they don't, particularly older folks get osteoporotic and have the problems that go along with that.
And it's more. We have a more of a lack of vitamin D in the winter because of the lack of sunlight. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. So you're sun hitting your skin helps produce vitamin D. You know, people who live in warmer climates who are outside more, have more skin exposure, you know, tend to have, you know, better levels. But, you know, there are exceptions. There are people that, you know, do it all right, but it still comes through and goes low.
So 1,000 international units.
Yeah, it's a good starting point.
902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Caroline to the program. Caroline, how are you?
Not too bad.
Your question for Dr. Gillis, please.
Just a second here. So I'm 58-year-old female. I do not have diabetes, and I was recently diagnosed with early stage cataracts. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because this is the second eyeglass place that I've gone to, and they're trying to figure out what's going on with why I'm having these reflections in my glasses. So I might have to have tinted glasses. We don't know yet. The sixth pair is coming in from this week. So
holy smokes!
Yeah, I know. So the first eyeglass place couldn't figure it out because I'm seeing a reflection behind me, all kinds of coatings and everything. And apparently, that's what they're telling me is when you get cataracts, you can see reflections from behind you in your glasses. So I'm just kind of freaking me out because I have early stage cataracts, and what does that mean at 58 years old?
Dr. Gillis, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just didn't hear a question.
Early stage cataracts. What are they, and what causes them?
Yeah, for most people, it's just time. For some people, it's excessive sun exposure. You know, exposure to radiation that's fairly uncommon can cause them. But for most people, it's time and sun exposure and genetics. Some people won't get them, where some people, they seem to run in families and happen early.
Is there a treatment? Do we still remove them?
Oh yeah, there's no other treatment other than to replace the lens. I mean, there's some technology for type of lens you get. There are multifocal lenses you can get put in now. They're some really fancy stuff, but at the end of the day, it's replacement.
Thanks, Caroline. 902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Lawrence to the show. Lawrence, how are you?
Hi, good morning. I have a question for the doctor, please.
Sure.
Okay. I'm 76. I injured I've got an injury in my mid-calf area of my left foot. And it seemed to start after I tried wearing a toe separator. This all, to me, sounds kind of silly, but regardless, this happened last October, and a pain developed in my calf area. I stopped using the toe separator, and it's developed into just a pretty well constant pain. I've tried appointments with physio. I've had three appointments. I had 3 appointments with acupuncture, another 3 with osteopathy, and then I tried dry needling at a clinic in Bedford. My doctor is now trying to get me in to see a specialist, but I'm getting very concerned about how long that's going to take. And I just
specialist for what?
He indicated to be a sports injury specialist. Just wondering if you have any thoughts or suggestions.
Well, I mean, without looking at you, I can just give you my general thoughts. I mean, have you tried changing your footwear? Sometimes calf injuries are an angle thing. I wear flat shoes. I have my Achilles tendons and lower calves kill me. So I tend to wear either heel inserts in flat shoes, or I wear something with a higher heel on it. That solves my problem. If you've got an inflammatory issue somewhere there, presumably the physio or the osteo told you something, that they thought it was a muscle or a tendon or something. If it's inflamed, have you tried some anti-inflammatories? I believe ibuprofen, these sorts of things.
Sorry. I have high blood pressure. I'm on blood pressure medication, so I've been avoiding ibuprofen. But there doesn't seem to be any other option for inflammation that I know of.
A short course of anti-inflammatories, as long as you watch your blood pressure. We have people on blood pressure pills on long-term anti-inflammatories. It does cause some people to go up, and it is worth watching it. But for the most part, it's it's not that big a deal. You keep an eye on it. So, a short course, a week or so of an anti-inflammatory monitored by your doctor would be worth looking at. And, I can't imagine you've had a clot in your calf for this long, but if you've, haven't had an ultrasound of your calf, if you've had, calf pain for, how long did you say?
It's a year now. It last October.
Yeah, you probably should get an ultrasound of your leg just to make sure there's nothing else going on in there. So those are my suggestions.
Thanks for the call, Lawrence. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. I just received an email from a listener, Dr. John. It reads like this: I received the flu vaccine this week, and ever since I've had flu-like symptoms. I've heard from others that they've heard of other people. I've heard from others, but they've had the same experience. Is it common to have flu-like symptoms after getting the shot?
I wouldn't say it's common. Some people have a mild kind of feeling off for a few hours to a day. Most people don't. I mean, I think a lot of people report that with COVID shots, especially the early ones. They report it with shingle shots. So it's not uncommon to feel a little bit off. Most people don't feel anything. Some people feel a bit of soreness in their arms. So like I said, everybody's different.
902-405-6000 is the number. That's 902-405-6000. Another email, Dr. John. It says, I seem to get more migraines at this time of the year. Is it because of the change in the weather? I normally take Advil for them, but is there a better way to ease the symptoms?
Yeah, I mean, for most people, Advil, I should say most people, for a lot of people, if they take Advil, particularly the quick onset liquid gels, when they feel one coming on, it's usually, or can be enough to get rid of it. It really depends on how it's affecting you. If that's doing the trick, for some people, Tylenol and caffeine is effective. Caffeine is a good abortive drug for migraines. Some people will take a caffeine pill or drink a cup of coffee and take a couple of Advil. That's how they manage it. It really depends on how it's affecting you. I mean, if I get maybe 2 migraines a year, and usually I can feel it coming on, and I take some Advil, it goes away. The odd time I have to take something a little stronger. There's an anti-inflammatory powder out there called Cambia that I keep around. Made the mistake when I was traveling once. If I wasn't paying attention, I was pouring water for myself for the powder and Diet Coke for my daughter, but I put the powder in the Diet Coke. It foamed up, but it was the only one I had, so I had to drink it, and it was disgusting. So do not put your migraine drugs in your Diet Coke if you can avoid it. But anyway, coming back to the point, if Advil handles it, Advil's a good choice. There are people out there that are on 3 preventative drugs and 3 abortive drugs and can't get rid of a migraine. If you're lucky enough that Advil does the trick, then carry on.
Is it dependent on? Obviously, it's dependent on the person. But are they more prevalent in the winter, the summer, or does it matter?
It's all over the place. People have so many different triggers. They have environmental triggers. They have food triggers. They have stress triggers. It's really hard to pin that down.
The telephone number is 902-405-6000. We're going to take a break for the news, and on the other side, Dr. John's here for the next 30 minutes. If you have a medical-related question, the lines are wide open. Here's a great opportunity. You're listening to House Calls on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is House Calls. Dr. John's with us for the next 30 minutes or so. If you have a medical-related question, if something's bothering you, well, maybe you want a second opinion, lots of lines open for you. So if you want to get into the conversation, you can do that. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's get Dr. John locked in so we don't lose him. And we'll welcome Gary to the program. Gary, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, dear.
What's your question for Dr. John, please?
Well, it's not really a question. It's just, Dr. John, I just recently was released from Dartmouth General Hospital for my 3rd stay in the last 6 months. I just wanted to put a big shout out to all the nursing staff.
Gary, I can barely hear you. Your phone is cutting in and out. I'm sorry. I'll pass along your laurels to Dr. John. Thank you very much for calling. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Yeah,
your phone's a little bit loud. I couldn't hear what Gary was saying. Gary said that he's been at the General 3 times now, and just wants to send some shout outs to the staff and the doctors and the nurses at the hospital for the fine service that he received when he was in their care.
Yeah, there's great people working there, and often under very difficult conditions. So we tip their hat to everybody, particularly those who are working 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week there, and again in tough conditions. So appreciate that, Gary. 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, this came in during the break. It said, I just recently had a family member diagnosed with male breast cancer. Is it common? And are the treatments the same as the treatments would be for a woman with breast cancer? Yeah, so no, it's not common, but we see it from time to time. I mean, the general principle is the same: is removal of a tumor, assessment of whether it's spread, and depending on that, various types of treatment, including radiation and chemo. But sort of a different, very different pattern. It's not something that we routinely screen for, and we certainly tell men to, if you see a lump, report it. But it's a much more common condition in women, hence the extensive, generally effective screening programs we have, for self-examination, mammography, and awareness. But it is important for men to be aware that this is possible, and if you see something that's not supposed to be there, definitely report it. Get it checked. Is
mastectomy available for men, or is the area too small?
Well, I mean, again, it's there's not often very much to take out. It's not the same type of thing where women are at risk with, even though the tumor may be smaller, that, it could recur in the rest of the breast tissue. With men, the principle is to remove the area around it. But again, the idea is the same. Remove as much as you can as needed based on, where it is, how big it is, and, whether it's spread or not.
902-405-6000 is the number. Let's go back to the phone lines. We welcome Tom to the show. Tom, your question for Dr. John, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My wife was in to see the doctor the other day, and the doctor suggests that she get this RSV shot. And so she said, okay. So we come home, and the druggist called and said, when do you want it? And she said it'll be $270, I think, and $70 or $75 for the shot. Now, is the government ever going to cover that sometime down the road, or did you hear anything about that?
If I could predict what the government was going to do, my friend, I swear to God I wouldn't be on here. I'd be sitting with Dan on a yacht in the Cayman Islands drinking Mai Tais. But anyway, with that said, they probably will at some point. It's very new. What typically happens with these things is the price comes down. They evaluate, how effective it is at preventing illness, and at some point they'll decide to start to cover it. I knew it wasn't covered. I didn't realize it was that expensive. So, thank you for sharing that price with us. You may want to make a couple calls and see if it's the same price everywhere, because I hadn't heard a number that high, but I could be wrong.
That could be kind of cost prohibitive to people, right? It's kind of expensive.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, if you have private insurance, I think often when these things come out, that's, whether it's the target or what ends up happening is that people have insurance, they do it. But, the whole point of the RSV vaccine is it's mostly indicated in people over 65 and people with other health conditions. And, a lot of folks that are retired or on a fixed income, can't afford a $270 shot. That's tough. Agreed. So hopefully they do eventually cover it. But I would maybe make a couple calls and see what it costs. I may see if I can find out myself.
Thanks for the call, Tom. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. Yeah, you're right, Dr. John. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have something that's at a price out of a lot of people's wheelhouse, and the idea is getting more people vaccinated, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, and specifically this one. I mean, this is not, I want to go to Mexico and go touring the jungle for fun.
Yeah.
This is, I don't want to get sick in the winter because I'm 65 and over and this virus is around. very different animal. I mean, hepatitis vaccination is very important, but it is not something that you're at risk at day in and day out living here, particularly if you're older and have health conditions, lung conditions, etc. So, and again, this is how these things typically evolve. The price comes down, they see how they're working, and often they'll get covered, but not always.
So I assume that the only place you can get that shot is at the pharmacy. You can't get it at your doctor's office?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't stock it. I mean, I say this to people, from time to time, and it's sometimes an interesting conversation. The pharmacies charge a fee to administer it. You can theoretically go to the pharmacy, pick it up, try and make another appointment, drive halfway back across town, wait, get your shot, and not be charged in the doctor's office. But for some people, I think for a lot of people, it's much more cost and time efficient to pay the pharmacy to do it. But again, we have to be sensitive to the fact that not everybody, even for a modest fee, can afford that. So we try to be as accommodating as we can in those cases.
Is this a new drug for adults? Because I know that we used to immunize against RSV for children, correct?
Yeah, RSV has been around forever. I always thought of it as a childhood disease, and it's only in the last couple seasons that it's sort of, whether it's mutated or must have changed a bit so that it's starting to affect adults and particularly vulnerable seniors.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, got another email here. We've got lots of emails today. People are afraid to talk to you, I guess. Anyway, this one says, and it's pretty short, it says, my father has been diagnosed with COPD. What is it?
COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is something that causes breathing problems. The most common cause thereof is smoking, and after that, different causes, but often chemicals or air pollution, and basically causes the airflow in the lungs to get restricted, and continues to get worse if people continue to either smoke or be exposed to certain pollutants. There are treatments, and by stopping those irritants, it can stabilize and get better. So that's what we aim for.
It's that when people get diagnosed with COPD, that's an awful scary diagnosis. But I would imagine, like many other diseases that we deal with, the advancements are getting better, and the treatments are getting better for this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, absolutely. It's still, and look, we know it's tough to quit smoking. We know it's an addiction, and many people tried very hard. But we still see a lot of people that are, on 4 puffers and 2 different other drugs, and they're still smoking a pack a day. And, the puffers aren't going to get ahead of that.
Going to take our last break. Dr. John's back on the other side of it. House Calls continues right to the top of the hour. The number is 902-405-6000. We're back in minutes.
Axe.
Welcome back. A few minutes left with Dr. John. If you want to get your call in, we'll do our best to get you back on the line. We appear to have lost Dr. John into the ether, and it wasn't my fault this time. Usually I hang up on him. I think there he is. Is that you, Dr. John?
Gotcha.
Wasn't me this time. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. Let's welcome Philip to the program. Philip, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you.
Your question?
My question is to do with muscle spasms in my legs, from my ankle up to my kneecap. I've had it for about a week now, and I went to the emergency this past Saturday, and the only thing they really gave to me for it was have me reduce my cholesterol, called rosuvastatin. Reduce that for a week and see what happens. Is there anything else I should be doing? Or anything else to help the pain in my legs where I can hardly walk?
And is that both sides?
Pardon me?
Is it both sides or just one?
Both.
Yeah, it's a little unusual. Did they do any testing on you?
Not really. He just reduced my cholesterol.
No, but did they do any blood work or any imaging?
Oh, yes, they did all that. Yeah, they did all that, and everything was fine. The blood work was fine.
You didn't have an ultrasound or anything?
Not that day, no.
Did you have one another day? I'm pulling information out of here.
Oh yeah, no, I've had in the last couple of months I've had one.
Off your legs?
No, I didn't have any problems with my legs then, but other issues I have COPD and things.
Okay, yeah. I mean, how long have you been on the cholesterol med?
Oh, I've been on that for years.
Yeah, very much. That's what I figured. It very much surprised me if you suddenly started having leg cramps from a cholesterol med after years. That's if it happens, it usually happens very quickly, or with a dose change. So I think that's unlikely. The next most common things, people pull muscles, but it's really unusual to do that on both sides. If you're having any signs of swelling or anything, you could be retaining fluid. You could have gout, but again, that's unusual to have it on both sides, and that's a joint thing, not a muscle thing. Are you taking anything for it? Like, did you take any ibuprofen or Aleve or any anti-inflammatories to try and settle it down?
Well, I'm taking an anti-inflammatory. I had a flare-up of my COPD at the same time, and I'm on antibiotics for that now.
I don't mean an antibiotic. I mean like something like ibuprofen or Aleve or something like that, like a painkiller that reduces inflammation.
No. Unless.
And has this gotten worse since you're in the hospital?
It's about the same.
Yeah, I mean, if you can't walk, you need to go back and get rechecked. I mean, if it's really that bad. I mean, that's reducing your cholesterol med is not an answer if you truly can't walk. And, in the meantime, if you don't have any reason not to, I would try some anti-inflammatories, some ibuprofen or Aleve, maybe chat with your own doc about that. But it sounds like this needs another look. It hasn't been, properly differentiated.
Thanks for the call, Philip. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. We welcome Amanda to the program. Amanda, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good. Your question for Dr. Gillis, please.
Okay, so Dr. Gillis, I'm perimenopausal. A few symptoms. Went to the Women's Health Clinic in Bedford. Been diagnosed, and I might be saying this incorrectly, Lichen sclerosis.
Okay.
I'm going to OBGYN in December. Got the referral, possible biopsy, but I'm a little confused because the physician wanted to put me on HRT. But when I was reading the side effects of HRT, it said may cause more itching. And with this...
I think we lost you, Amanda. I'm going to put you on hold. Dr. John, you get enough there?
Not really, no. Wasn't sure what the question was.
Well, Vanessa's going to work to try and get her back on the line here, and we can... I'm getting the thumbs up. Let's try again. You still there, Amanda?
Okay, yeah, I am. Sorry about that. So I guess my question is, if I take HRT, will this increase the itching that I have from this condition? Also, is it an autoimmune condition or is it not? Because nobody seems to be able to answer that.
Well, if nobody can, I doubt I can. But I don't think it is, but I'd have to look that up. Let's do that. Let us ask the internet right now. National Council, NCBI, lichen sclerosis is an uncommon autoimmune condition characterized by skin atrophy and hypopigmentation. It most commonly affects the genital skin and occurs in women more than men. So there we go. I did not think of it as an autoimmune condition. Well, that's
okay.
So the they in this case is the American authorities. So this is good. Lichen sclerosis and HRT are, can be related, but treating the overall lack of hormones should improve things in general. I don't think it's a specific treatment for lichen sclerosis, but should improve overall symptomatology, which is why I think they, you may have the itching, if you have it, maybe due that to the lichen sclerosis, but may just be due to dryness and some other changes that happen. So I think the idea is that the HRT would help that in general, and that it's a good idea. Again, I'm not an expert in women's health. If you saw someone who does that day in and day out, I would take their word more than mine.
Thanks for the call, Amanda. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000 is the number. Just a couple of minutes left here. Dr. John got an email question. It says, well, actually, it's two questions. One, it says, I'm new to exercise. I've been reading a lot about high-intensity interval training. Is that recommended for someone trying to get into shape? And the second question is, what's better for my heart health, running or walking?
Well, all of that tends what you're trying to do. I mean, high-intensity training, if you're trying to lose weight and get into depends what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're trying to improve your cardiovascular reserve and get fit for sports, that is often the hallmark of how people train. They'll do low intensity stuff, high intensity stuff. It does have the effect of burning a lot of calories as well, and can be very effective if your body's up to it. If you can handle, I used to do a fair bit of it. I would walk, jog, sprint on a treadmill or outside. Hard work, but a great way to get yourself in shape quickly. If your main goal is to lose weight and you don't want to push yourself that hard, then lighter, consistent exercise like walking, jogging, cycling is very effective. It's really just if you're biking at 25 miles an hour for 10 minutes, you're going to burn a lot more calories than if you're, biking for 10 minutes at half that speed. It's just, it's how this works. It's work rate. So it's finding the combination of an exercise that you like to do and can tolerate with what your goals are, whether they be weight loss or cardiovascular fitness. What's better for your heart? I mean, again, what are you trying to do? If you're trying to push your heart to perform better for athletic purposes, then by all means, running is the way to go, and high intensity interval training on top of that. If your goal is to be healthy and fit and to lose weight over time, then walking is perfectly effective and a very good thing to do, and often easier for people to fit into their lives. So it's finding that mix.
Dr. John, we're just about out of time. I appreciate yours. We'll talk to you next week.
Have a great day. Thank you.
That is Dr. John Gillis. He's here every Wednesday from 11 until 12 to answer your medical-related questions. We are going to stop here very shortly, and after the break, we're going to open up the telephone lines. Lots to talk about in the province of Nova Scotia with this election campaign going on. The Premier yesterday announcing that he will eliminate the tolls on the bridge. He calls it a tax on going to work, and also results in backing up traffic when you have to stop at the tolls. My question to you today is, do you think that that's, A, the right approach? I've seen numbers anywhere from $40 to $50 million to do that. Because we know the bridges are paid for. That happened before we went into the pandemic. And the toll that we've been paying to Halifax Harbour Bridges, who administers this, is purely for maintenance. And we know that those bridges have been closed many times this year because there's ongoing maintenance. They're old, and they're in need of maintenance. All that being said, do you like this? Do you think this is something that will benefit you? Or do you think that it's low-hanging fruit and it's going to end up costing us in the end? Well, it always costs us in the end, doesn't it? But the Premier yesterday said that it's a tax on going to work and that it contributes to some of the gridlock that we saw today, except that one of the reasons for the gridlock was there's a crash on both bridges at the same time. I have some reservations about it. I mean, nobody likes paying the tax. Nobody likes paying a toll. But I think if they're going to rip the tolls out or remove the tolls, they're going to have to do something about the approaches. Because we're going to go from 2 lanes, and I'm looking at the McKay in my brain, we're going to go from 2 lanes like it is now to 6 or 7, and then back to 2 or 3 real quick for no reason. Now I understand it because they try to get as many people paying the tolls at the same time as and you know that bottleneck that it creates. So are we going to have to fix the approach if we remove the tolls? Is removing the tolls from the McKay and the McDonald Bridge a sound decision? That's the question when we come back. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back after the news. Welcome back. It's the midweek meltdown. This is your opportunity to chat about whatever it is you want to chat about. We had an hour-long conversation earlier today with the NDP leader, Claudia Chender, who was in here for the first time, I think, as the leader, to do an hour-long interview and took your questions. Great questions from y'all. I appreciate that. And she seemed to be pretty happy with what she was hearing, and which is, I guess, good. We're going to continue that. We've had the premier, or the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, Tim Houston, just before the election. We've now had the leader of the NDP. We're now working to bring the leader of the Liberal Party into the studio to do the very same thing. It's part of our commitment to you to cover this election. And Vanessa is still working behind the scenes. We're going to try and get all three of them in here at the same time and to have a little bit of a tete-a-tete, as they would say. But we're working on that. So keep you up to date on what's going on with that as we move forward. Telephone lines are open. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's the Friday, or not the Friday. See, I did that again. I did it last week too. I wish it was Friday, but it's not. It's the midweek meltdown, which is your opportunity to talk about, it's been a long week already, your opportunity to talk about anything that you want to talk about, whatever is on your mind. I did throw a question out there. We heard from the premier yesterday announcing that if elected in April, I think it is, he is going to remove the tolls on the McKay and the McDonald bridges in Halifax, spanning the Halifax Harbor, saying that it's a tax on people going to work, and it contributes to the traffic chaos that we saw today. Is this a sound decision? Nobody likes a toll. I don't think anybody will be upset not having to pay the $1 or whatever it is now that it is to cross the bridge. But is this a sound decision? Because somebody's got to pay for the maintenance on that bridge, and you know where that's coming from. That's coming from you and I and our first caller, Tony. Tony, it's coming out of your pocket too, right?
No, I don't go across the bridge very often, thank goodness. I called about the bridges, and I'm going to probably piss you off a bit.
Fair enough.
The bridges don't mean crap to me. We got bigger problems than the bridges. The bridge, that's a dollop in the issues of money that is being spent in the municipality and throughout the province, and even overall in Canada. So those bridges, yes, they got to be maintained. There's no doubt. And if you take the toll off, there's only one other. A toll is a tax, right? That's what a toll really is.
Absolutely.
It's a tax for using that bridge. So how would you, if you take the toll off, you just shift the tax to somewhere else. That's what's going to happen.
Right.
It's that simple. The other thing that I want to talk about is, I'm going to ask you a rhetorical question.
Okay.
If I said to you, Dan, I'm going to give you X amount of dollars, and I want you to build me 7,000 homes, and I want them built right now, what happens? How long is that going to take?
Well, I guess there's a million different variables, right? You got to get somebody to build it, got to get the land to build it on, you get the construction materials, so on and so forth.
Now, I said the money doesn't matter, but the money's got to come from somewhere.
Well, it's going to come from the
And
taxpayer.
I heard this morning non-profit organizations are going to run this, and the money's got to come from somewhere. The city of Halifax just got, depending on the number you believe, $62 million to $83 million from the feds to develop a body that is going to look into housing and come up with a plan. All right? How long is that going to take? A year?
Oh, at
2
least.
years?
Yep.
Now you got 67, or let's say $70 million rounded off, being spent on really nothing more than management, right? Another bureaucracy. They said, well, at the end of it, I asked this question. They said, well, yeah, there's going to be a few houses built. Well, a few's not 7,000. What I'm going here, Claudia Chender has a good heart, but she doesn't have a good brain at times. You cannot say that you want to do this and not say how you're going to do it, and I mean specifically how you're going to do it, or where you're going to get the money from. Now you're going to build all these housings. You're going to build this bureaucracy. You're going to turn it over to a NPO, and who's going to pay the NPO? Where's that money coming from? You understand? And she comes up with all these brilliant problems. And by the way, you talk about wasting $13 million. Tell me, how many seats do you think that the NDP is going to get in a new sitting after this election is over? Rhetorical. They only got 6 seats now, and their federal party is going down the pooper as well. And now Quebecois, let's go to the feds. Quebecois comes out and says, I'm going to bring the parties together, and we're going to take the government down. You're not taking the government down as long as Jagmeet Singh supports the government, unless you can get 24 liberals to say we're going to dump the prime minister. Well, they're not going to do that. They're afraid of the guy. Their jobs go out the window if he goes out the window. So all of this is rhetoric. It's I'm so disgusted with the U.S. System. I don't know who's going to win that election. I really don't. But it's the same crap. One gets up and abuses one party or one issue. The other one gets up and says, this is how we're going to fix it. But nobody says, let me give you the plan. Oh, I have a plan. And you don't have any money. Well, so what? We'll get it. And there's only one place that money comes from.
You and I, Tony. Appreciate it. I'm up against it. So I want to move on, okay? Have a good one.
Yeah. Thanks for the time.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. It tends to be what election campaigns are, right? It's a bunch of promises, and then at the end of the day, when one party or another forms government, then we hold them to account on their promises. Tim Houston made some promises during the last election campaign that he didn't stick to. Remember the paycheck guarantee when he said you're going to have more money in your pocket? He even admitted that they couldn't do it. So that's what these opportunities are. As much as, do I think we needed an election? No. But this is an opportunity for you to pass judgment on the promises made before and the promises that are being made now, and if you can believe them. That goes for all the parties. Ryan, how are you?
Good. How about yourself today, other than the traffic?
Oh, my goodness, the traffic.
I was coming from Sackville. Literally every highway I crossed in Nova Scotia today, I haven't seen traffic like that in probably a couple of years. It's been insane.
What's on your mind today, Ryan?
Let's talk about the bridges. I was going to call when Ms. Gender was on to ask her position on provincial debt. So if we eliminate the tolls, and you're right, the debt on the principal construction of the bridges was paid off a long time ago. But the Bridge Commission is still $120 million in debt today from maintenance. Where's that money going to go? And that's what the tolls pay for. So you take that away, and like you said, we're just going to be paying for more of it. And the idea that that's what causes the majority of congestion on the bridge is ridiculous, especially when it comes to the McDonald Bridge. Because at the other end of it, you have a set of stoplights.
Right.
That causes most of the traffic. Yep. And even when the light's green, it seems like every time the light's green, you have pedestrians crossing at McDonald's that are slowing it down even further. So eliminating the tolls really is not going to do anything getting people out of Halifax back to Dartmouth. It might help in the morning, but you got stoplights there. That aside, we can't keep doing this. I mean, everyone likes to point at the Liberals saying, look how much debt they're putting us. They're putting the whole Canadian economy into debt. Well, Nova Scotia's debt has risen by the third most of any province in Canada over the last 3 years. And that's a conservative government. We have surpluses after surplus. Where's it all going? How are we still ending up hundreds of millions of dollars in debt more every year? It's ridiculous. So any more of these cuts, I can't support him. And that aside, I can't think of one single election promise he made last time that he's kept. I don't know why anyone would believe that he would keep this one.
Ryan, I appreciate the call, sir.
Have a good day.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. The midweek meltdown continues on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. Midweek Meltdown, 902-405-6000. This hour dedicated to you to talk about whatever it is on your mind. Bridge toll's a good idea. Did you hear something in the hour-long conversation that we had with Claudia Chender that you liked? Maybe you didn't like. Maybe you didn't hear. Here's your opportunity to talk about it. 902-405-6000. We welcome Gloria to the program. Gloria, how are you?
How are you, Dan? Dan, first of all, did you say Todd will be back soon?
He will be.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
It is. Then you don't have to deal with me anymore.
No, not that. It's just wonderful that he came along so well.
I don't want to prejudge it. Had a conversation with him last week. Steve Murphy talked to him last weekend, and we're looking somewhere mid-November.
That's what I thought I heard. That's great. No, nothing, because you're not doing a good job, Dan. But I have a question for you. When you had the Premier on, you made the statement about 3 times, no holds barred.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Okay. So I called Claudia Schender, not because she's the leader, but because she represents my city.
Mm-hmm.
Asking her, why should people vote for her? I can't see anything that they've accomplished. All she did was talk about what the province has done. The hospital, the province has done a wonderful job. And downtown Dartmouth, she had nothing to do with downtown Dartmouth. And you cut me off.
I didn't cut you off, Gloria. If you were listening at the very beginning of the show, I said that we wanted to get as many callers in as we could. And
but
we
she
asked one question.
Wouldn't answer my question.
Well, Gloria, if that was the case, it would have went on for an hour, and we have 2 callers, and that's not fair to everybody else, is it?
I know that, Dan. I understand that. And I usually make my calls very short
You
when I
usually
call.
do. I'll give you that.
I don't ramble and go on. But she kept talking like a typical politician about all the things that happened in Dartmouth that she played no role in. That was my question.
Fair.
Anyway, have a good day, Dan.
You have a good one too, Gloria.
Like
Appreciate
you're
it.
having a great one.
Well, it's one of those days. Thanks, Gloria. 902-405-6000. It was in the ground rules. I said it off the beginning, and I've said it out that we wanted to get to as many callers as we could. Keep the preamble short, and keep your question to 1. Gloria asked the question. Question answered. Didn't like the answer? Well, then further conversations can be had. I wanted to get to as many of you as I could, and we still left people disappointed. Maybe we'll do it again. We'll see. 902-405-6000. Grant, how are you?
Good morning. Calling about something else, but the bridge, I mean, if they laid off a few of those bridge cashiers, I'm sure that would save a few $100,000 a year, wouldn't it?
One would think, but I'm not sure if that's just their only function.
Well,
right?
Anyway, that's not why I was calling.
Okay.
So the work from office with the government workers, I have a theory on this.
Okay.
And
we lost you, Grant. Are you there? Grant, did you mute yourself? I'm going to stick you on hold. I don't want to hang up on you, Grant, so I'm going to stick you on hold. And, we lost him. Anyway, call back, Grant. Vanessa's looking for your call. 902-405-6000. I don't know what happened. That's the second time today. I wonder if there's something weird going on with the phones. Rob, how are you?
Not too bad, Dan. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. What's going on?
I just wanted to let people know with the upcoming elections coming on, with the traffic this morning, that Highway 102 is outdated. It was built in the late 50s, I do believe, and the traffic for that highway was for 150 to 200,000. Anyways, I don't like the snap election that Houston called. It reminds me of Trudeau at 2020 or 2021 when we went to the polls, where he slid in mass immigration without any infrastructure. Well, Tim Houston wants 2 million people in Nova Scotia, and I heard that from his own mouth.
Yep.
And the thing is he going to pull off another Trudeau, start adding more people to this province without upgrading the highways or the infrastructure? That was ridiculous this morning, Dan.
It was bonkers. But Rob, I'm not to speak for the Premier, but he did say that he wants to double the population of Nova Scotia in 40 years, not tomorrow.
Well, I get that, but in the same breath, we also heard that with the feds too.
Right.
And the thing is there another motive to this to get him in at the end of November, or he has something in the back plans to distract us all? But the first and utmost is get these highways up to par for the population of the future, not something that we have today. And that's my point.
I agree with you, Rob, 100%.
And 102 should be at least 4 lanes, or 3 lanes would get us by, but they need 4 lanes for the upcoming future.
And we need to get rid of the pinch points, like the pinch point at exit 0, and when from Northwest Arm or Dunbrack Street, and the pinch point at the lights at Romans Avenue on Bears Road. It backs traffic up for 5 miles.
Oh, I live in the parks of West Bedford. It takes me an hour just to get on the highway some mornings,
right,
with the traffic.
I hear you.
But the big problem is that highway and the infrastructure is so outdated that we need an upgrade, not in 5 years or 10 years. We need it now. We need those egresses in and out of Hammonds Plains and Sackville. Like, this is getting beyond. And I heard on the news, I think it was the first of the week or the end of last week, that the province is trying to figure out a way to have these. Well, if you're trying to figure out, let's start getting rid of some red tape. It's almost 2 years, well, a year and a half since the fire over in Tentown, Westwood Hills there. And the thing is, no one's talking about that. No one's saying, well, we need. So I suggest to all the people that are going to vote, I make that one of the election top lines right there on top with the healthcare. And with Tim Houston and healthcare, he likes buying buildings, but he doesn't fill them. You know, like everything that he did the last few years, I won't vote for him. I'd rather vote for an independent than any party because I don't trust any of them.
Rob, I appreciate your call, sir.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's get Grant back on the air. Grant, sorry about that. I lost you.
Yeah, cell phone. Sorry about that.
It's all right. What's on your mind?
I'll get it out before it happens again. My theory on the government employees being sent back to the office is I genuinely believe that they want them to quit. They overhired during COVID. Lots of companies did. They want to make it so inconvenient, so miserable that they quit. That way they don't have to lay them off. And I say this because Amazon did it at their headquarters. They sent everyone back to the office. They didn't have to. And the CEO basically said, if you don't like it, quit. And I thought, what a way to get people off the payroll.
What a way to make people quit would make them go to work like you and I do every day. Wild, eh?
Well, and I genuinely think that's why they did it. Make them drive downtown every day in that traffic, make them so miserable that they quit, and then they don't get to pay any severance.
Interesting theory, Grant. Appreciate the call. 902-405-6000. 902-405-6000. When you put it into that context, that's let's force the government workers, our workers, to come back to work 5 days a week, and that'll make them quit because it's so miserable. Well, what does that mean for the rest of us? Holy jeez, right? I don't think we missed. I know I didn't miss a single day during the pandemic, and I come to work every day. I'll complain about it. I do it a lot on here, and Vanessa's shaking her head. Yeah, he does. But I still come to work. Need to stop down. The Midweek Meltdown continues on the other side of the break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. This is House Calls. Dr. John's with us for the next 30 minutes or so. If you have a medical-related question, if something's bothering you, well, maybe you want a second opinion, lots of lines open for you. So if you want to get into the conversation, you can do that. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Let's get Dr. John locked in so we don't lose him. And we'll welcome Gary to the program. Gary, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much, Dan.
What's your question for Dr. John, please?
Well, it's not really a question. It's just, Dr. John, I just recently was released from Dartmouth General Hospital for my third stay in the last 6 months. I just wanted to put a big shout out to all the nursing staff.
Gary, I can barely hear you. Your phone is cutting in and out. I'm sorry. I'll pass along your laurels to Dr. John. Thank you very much for calling. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Dr. John, are you there?
Oh, I'm here. Yeah.
Your phone's a little bit loud. I couldn't hear what Gary was saying. Gary said that he's been at Dartmouth General 3 times now, and just wants to send some shout outs to the staff and the doctors and the nurses at the hospital for the fine service that he received when he was in their care.
Yeah, there's great people working there, and often under very difficult conditions. So, we tip their hat to everybody, particularly those who are working, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week there, and again, in tough conditions. So, appreciate that, Gary.
902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, this came in during the break. It said, I just recently had a family member diagnosed with male breast cancer. Is it common? And are the treatments the same as the treatments would be for a woman with breast cancer?
Yeah, so no, it's not common, but we see it from time to time. I mean, the general principle is the same: is removal of a tumor, assessment of whether it's spread, and depending on that, various types of treatment, including radiation and chemo. But sort of a different, very different pattern. It's not something that we routinely screen for. And we certainly tell men to, if you see a lump, report it. But, it's a much more common condition in women, hence the extensive, generally effective screening programs we have, for self-examination, mammography, and awareness. But it is important for men to be aware that this is possible. And if you see something that's not supposed to be there, definitely report it and get it checked. Is
mastectomy available for men, or is the area too small?
Well, I mean, again, it's there's not often very much to take out. It's not the same type of thing where women are at risk with, even though the tumor may be smaller, that, it could recur in the rest of the breast tissue. With men, the principle is to remove the area around it. But again, the idea is the same. Remove as much as you can as needed based on, where it is, how big it is, and, whether it's spread or not.
902-405-6000 is the number. Let's go back to the phone lines. We welcome Tom to the show. Tom, your question for Dr. John, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My wife was in to see the doctor the other day, and the doctor suggested that she get this RSV shot. And so she said, okay. So we come home, and the druggist called and said, when do you want it? And she said it'll be $270, I think, and $70 or $75 for the shot. Now, is the government ever going to cover that sometime down the road, or did you hear anything about that?
If I could predict what the government was going to do, my friend, I swear to God, I wouldn't be on here. I'd be sitting with Dan on a yacht in the Cayman Islands drinking Mai Tais. But anyway, with that said, they probably will at some point. It's very new. What typically happens with these things is the price comes down. They evaluate, how effective it is at preventing illness, and at some point they'll decide to start to cover it. I knew it wasn't covered. I didn't realize it was that expensive. So, thank you for sharing that price with us. You may want to make a couple calls and see if it's the same price everywhere, because I hadn't heard a number that high, but I could be wrong.
That could be kind of cost prohibitive to people, right? It's kind of expensive.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, if you have private insurance, I think often when these things come out, that's, whether it's the target or what ends up happening is that people have insurance, they do it. But, the whole point of the RSV vaccine is it's mostly indicated in people over 65 and people with other health conditions. And, a lot of folks that are retired or on a fixed income, can't afford a $270 shot. That's tough. Agreed. So hopefully they do eventually cover it. But I would maybe make a couple calls and see what it costs. I may see if I can find out myself.
Thanks for the call, Tom. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. Yeah, you're right, Dr. John. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have something that's at a price out of a lot of people's wheelhouse, and the idea is getting more people vaccinated, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, and specifically this one. I mean, this is not, I want to go to Mexico and go touring the jungle for fun.
Yeah.
This is, I don't want to get sick in the winter because I'm 65 and over and this virus is around. Very different animal. I mean, hepatitis vaccination is very important, but it is not something that you're at risk at day in and day out living here, particularly if you're older and have health conditions, lung conditions, etc. So, and again, this is how these things typically evolve. The price comes down, they see how they're working, and often they'll get covered, but not always.
So I assume that the only place you can get that shot is at the pharmacy. You can't get it at your doctor's office?
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't stock it. I mean, I say this to people, from time to time, and it's sometimes an interesting conversation. The pharmacies charge a fee to administer it. You can theoretically go to the pharmacy, pick it up, try and make another appointment, drive halfway back across town, wait, get your shot, and not be charged in the doctor's office. But for some people, it's, I think for a lot of people, it's much more cost and time efficient to pay the pharmacy to do it. But again, we have to be sensitive to the fact that not everybody, even for, a modest fee, can afford that. So we, try to be as accommodating as we can in those cases.
Is this a new drug for adults? Because I know that we used to immunize against RSV for children, correct?
Yeah, RSV has been around, forever. I always thought of it as a childhood disease, and it's only in the last couple seasons that it's sort of, whether it's mutated or must have changed a bit so that it's starting to affect adults and particularly vulnerable seniors.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000 is the number. Dr. John, got another email here. We've got lots of emails today. People are afraid to talk to you, I guess. Anyway, this one says, and it's pretty short, says, my father has been diagnosed with COPD. What is it?
COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which, is something that causes breathing problems. The most common cause thereof is smoking. And after that, different causes, but often chemicals or air pollution. And, basically causes, the airflow in the lungs to get restricted and, continues to get worse if people continue to either smoke or be exposed to, certain pollutants. There are treatments, and by stopping those irritants, it can stabilize and get better. So that's what we aim for.
It's that when people get diagnosed with COPD, that's an awful scary diagnosis. But I would imagine, like many other diseases that we deal with, the advancements are getting better and the treatments are getting better for this stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, absolutely. It's still, and look, we know it's tough to quit smoking. We know it's an addiction, and many people tried very hard. But we still see a lot of people that are, on 4 puffers and 2 different other drugs, and they're still smoking a pack a day. And, the puffers aren't going to get ahead of that.
Going to take our last break. Dr. John's back on the other side of it. House Calls continues right to the top of the hour. The number is 902-405-6000. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the program. Dan Alstrand along with you. A few minutes left. A few of you on the line, so I want to get to as many as I can. So we'll try and get... Len, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now, sir. Welcome to the show.
Very good. You're being awful strict today, Dan.
Well, we live by live by rules, right?
I hope everybody learns that particular thing, because when our friend Todd Veinotte is on, he lets people go on for quite a long time, which takes away from everybody else.
Well, that's just, I was trying to be fair to you. I don't want to talk about that anymore, Len. Let's just move on.
No, let's move on. This promise that Churchill has made about opening up some kind of clinics that's going to cost $40 million, I would like to ask him the question. We've got over 100,000 people in Nova Scotia without a doctor, and he's going to spend $40 million to open up places that can't provide doctors or nurses? Well, what a ridiculous platform that would be. I would never vote for Churchill because he was lousy when he was a minister, when his government was in power. So that's my story for today.
Appreciate it, Len. Have a good one. 902-405-6000. What he's talking about is an announcement today in Middleton, Nova Scotia. Zach Churchill announced that his government would build 20 collaborative care clinics, easy for me to say, expanding to 20 more across the province. So that's what those collaborative care... Claudia Chinner was talking about the collaborative care center that we have in the North End. Zach Churchill promising today to build 20 more of those across the province to help with the doctor shortage. Let's... where are we going here? I've lost my space. There we are. Pam, how are you?
Hi. Just calling in regarding some of the comments about the bridge, and I think getting rid of the tolls is a nice thing to do, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to put it out there that I think most people, before they make a statement that they're going to cover tolls, that as a business you would be doing the budgets and looking at it and seeing where you can pay for the maintenance and things like that. So I just feel that the Houston government probably has done their job on that side of things. People may just not know it, right?
The number I've seen is anywhere between 40 and 50 million a year.
Right. And what I'm saying is that I'm sure the Houston government has already done number crunching throughout our whole taxation system, our budgets, everything like that. And they probably know where that money's coming from so that it's not at the toll it's happening. And I do believe if you can get rid of the tolls, things will flow a little bit faster because the commuters, God love them, they get hung up in those tolls. And I just think anything that can help is a good thing.
Thanks for the call, Pam. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
902-405-6000 is the number. I don't think it should be up to me to decipher what the cost is, right? Should not and to be fair, he probably did. I wasn't at the news conference. But let me ask you this question quickly before we go to the phone lines. $40 to $50 million for the bridge, right, to take the tolls off. $260 million coming out of the coffers by reducing the HST by a single percentage point. So we're what, $300 million? That's a year. That's a year. I don't like taxes either. And I don't like tolls, because tolls are taxes, as Tony told us. But that's a lot of, in the old days we would say that's a lot of bread. Isn't it? Scott, how are you? Scott, are you there?
I am. How are you doing, Todd?
I'm well. It's Dan. Yep. Have a good...
Dan, sorry.
What's on your mind?
You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
Talking about transportation, I mean, our country and province is very young. We could learn a lot of lessons from how Europe has dealt with the transportation. And I also feel that the ripping up of the rail lines, although I do appreciate the recreational value to that, but the value of those rail lines could have been so important for our transportation issues, and I think we're a little short-sighted.
Yeah, and once they're up, they're not going back, because the cost to replace put those rail lines back, if they can even do it anymore, because some of that property may have been changed or sold off or whatever, is astronomical to put them back now. Once they're gone, they're gone.
Well, I think the infrastructure is still there. I mean, it would just be a little bit of maintenance, I think, and.
But who owns the bed now? Like that's my question is, like, who owns the old rail lines? Like, I don't think those are provincially owned anymore. I think the city owns some of them. Probably municipalities along the line have bought them for recreation trails, or have been at least given them for recreation trails. So, I think ownership would be an issue.
Certainly, but I think. That could be worked through compared to, the PCs are talking about looking at a new light rail system, which is going to cost $800 million from what I heard. So
even more than that. I've heard upwards of $10 billion from some people, and even more from others. So I don't think we've seen a price tag attached to that yet.
But I guess my ultimate point is that we're not reinventing the wheel. I mean, there's a lot of older countries and places in Europe and around the world that have dealt with transportation issues, and we really should look at that and not try to create something new. That's my only point.
Scott, I appreciate the call.
All right, thanks, Dan.
902, thanks. 902-405-6000. The European model gets talked about a lot, and having traveled in Europe, the rail network is extensive, and they've been building it for hundreds of years. So they built things when they were on and I get it, everything's relative, were cheaper than they are today. And for somebody to come up and say, look, we're going to build a rail line from point A to point B, and it's going to cost, I don't know, I'll throw a number out there, $5 billion. $5 billion on a province of 1 million people. And I get the feds would kick in money, and, but still, it's a massive, massive undertaking. And I don't know if our geography leads to building rail lines cheaply. Places that I've been to are reasonably flat. Don't deal with a whole lot of winter. Now, I get it. There are countries that have rail lines in the wintertime and trams and light rails that work. But I look to the nation's capital in Ottawa and to Calgary that have just invested in some new LRTs and light rail and trams, and they run into all kinds of problems with them. Not to suggest that we can't fix them, and not to suggest that we shouldn't have light rail in HRM to come. And our callers are right that we have to look past 5 years and the end of our nose. We have to look 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road. All of that being said, a $10 billion bill for light rail is a tough pill for many to swallow, right? There are other infrastructure needs that need to be done, right? Do you remember our caller from last week that said 12 years ago or 15 years ago when it was 12 years ago when Mike Savage took over office? He said that he was told, and it's the same number that I've heard, that we have $1 billion worth of infrastructure under our city streets that needs repair. $1 billion. And that was 12 years ago. So I'm going to suggest it's probably more now. Construction costs come with B's, not M's anymore. And the taxpayer base is still 1 million people here. In HRM, it's less than 500,000. Thanks to everybody who took the time out of their day today to pick up the phone, dial the numbers, and join the program. You make my day each and every day you do it. Thank you to Vanessa Vananez on the other side of the glass for keeping things running as orderly as we can. Some days it's easier than others. And a special thank you to Claudia Chender for spending an hour with us today. You'll be able to hear that interview if you missed it in perpetuity on our website in the podcast area. Vanessa and I will get that posted up very quickly for you. So if you missed it or you wanted to hear something again, it will be there for you to listen to. Have yourselves a fantastic day, everyone. Hopefully the drive home will be better than the drive in today. Be kind to one another. We'll see you tomorrow.